December 16th, 1944. Deep in the frozen forests of Lower Silesia, while the German war machine crumbled on every front, a convoy of black trucks rolled through the night with their headlights covered, escorted by SS guards who looked more like shadows than soldiers. They weren't transporting weapons. They weren't carrying gold, documents, or prisoners. They were carrying something far more dangerous. Hidden beneath layers of tarps, steel plates, and secrecy was a device that should never have existed. A device whispered about even among the SS, in corridors where no one dared to speak above a murmur. A device they called Die Glocke, the bell. To the Allies, it was nothing more than a rumor, another wonder weapon in a long list of German fantasies. But to the men guarding it that night, it was deadly real. They had watched scientists collapse after mere seconds of exposure. They had seen animals die instantly inside the testing chamber. They had been ordered to shoot anyone, even fellow Germans, who asked the wrong question. The convoy snaked toward a forgotten complex known only by a code name, Der Riese, the Giant, an underground labyrinth carved into the mountains, funded with millions of Reichsmarks, built by forced laborers who entered the tunnels and never returned. What the Reich was constructing beneath those mountains was not an aircraft, not a bomb, not a tank. It was an experiment in physics so extreme that even loyal SS officers wondered whether they were tampering with forces that no human should touch. Later testimonies would describe a metallic bell-shaped object pulsing with violet light, surrounded by swirling energy that bent the air itself and leaving behind burned stone and twisted plants wherever it was tested. Some said it was meant to generate limitless power. Others believed it was a propulsion system for Hitler's rumored anti-gravity craft. And a few whispered the most forbidden idea of all, that Die Glocke was an attempt to manipulate time. But none of that mattered to the soldiers escorting the trucks. All they knew was that everyone connected to the project, scientists, engineers, guards, was vanishing. Not dying. Vanishing. As if the project was swallowing its own witnesses. And on that freezing night in 1944, the device disappeared from history. No explosion, no wreckage, no evidence, just gone. When Allied troops reached the facility months later, they found empty halls, burnt documents, sealed tunnels, and a single reinforced chamber fused shut from the inside. Whatever had happened fast. And whoever had taken Die Glocke had done so before the world could understand what the Nazis had built. Today, nearly 80 years later, physicists still argue whether the device described in those scattered testimonies could even exist. A machine capable of bending space-time, a device that emitted radiation no known material could contain. A bell that glowed with impossible energy and left a trail of death in its wake. To uncover the truth of Die Glocke, we must go back, not to the end of the war, but to its beginning. To the moment when Nazi Germany became obsessed with a single idea. If you cannot win the war with weapons, you must win it by rewriting the laws of reality itself. Unless physics could be broken. Before Die Glocke became a weapon, before it became a myth, it began as an idea. And that idea was born long before the war. The year is 1939. While Europe stands on the edge of conflict, deep inside the marble corridors of Berlin's Reich Chancellery, Adolf Hitler meets privately with his most trusted inner circle. He is calm, focused, not the shouting dictator the world imagines. He speaks of a single belief. Germany does not lose wars because of courage. Germany loses wars because of technology. The First World War had taught him one lesson. Victory belongs to the nation that controls the future. And so, before a single shot is fired in WWII, Hitler makes a decision that will shape the fate of the Reich. Germany must conquer not only nations, but the very laws of nature. This idea, dangerous, seductive, impossible, became the foundation of something the Allies would only learn about years later. The Wunderwaffe program, the wonder weapons. But one project stood apart from the rest. More secret, more expensive, more terrifying. A project that required physicists dismissed by mainstream science, engineers willing to abandon ethics, and SS officers loyal enough to kill their own men. A project that began with a single question: what if the universe itself could be manipulated? The Occult Foundation, the Ahnenerbe. To understand Die Glocke, we must understand the people who funded it. The Ahnenerbe, Heinrich Himmler's pseudo-scientific research institute, was obsessed with ancient civilizations, forbidden knowledge, and lost technologies. They searched Tibet for mystical artifacts, Norway for runic power, the Middle East for relics said to influence destiny, and in their archives, they claimed to have found references to a strange, bell-shaped device used by an ancient civilization that vanished without explanation. Whether these legends were real or invented no longer mattered. To Himmler, they were inspiration. To Hitler, they were potential power. To German scientists, they were orders. Enter the scientists. 3 groups of researchers were brought into the project. 1. Conventional physicists, experts in electricity, magnetism, and materials. 2. Theoretical visionaries, men who studied space-time, unified fields, and ideas considered insane by the global academic community. 3. The Ahnenerbe specialists, archaeologists, occultists, and linguists who analyzed ancient texts for technological metaphors. For the first time in history, science, pseudoscience, and mysticism were fused into a single Nazi program. The goal was unclear. The purpose, even more so. But Hitler wanted results, and Himmler wanted miracles. The problem: Hitler couldn't solve. By 1940, Germany faced an inescapable truth. The war would not be won by tanks or infantry, not by submarines, not even by rockets. Britain refused to fall. The United States was awakening. The Soviet Union was an industrial monster. Hitler needed something impossible. A weapon unlike anything the world had ever seen. A device that could tip the balance instantly. Something that could break enemy lines, break enemy morale, or break the world itself. Something that did not rely on steel or gunpowder, but on physics the Allies did not understand. The birth of Die Glocke. In a sealed meeting room beneath the Reich Chancellery, a design was placed on the table, a metallic bell, 2 meters high, bound by thick dark plates, filled with rotating cylinders, a core requiring a mysterious substance called Zerum 525, described only as a violet metallic liquid of extreme density, stored in lead-lined containers. According to the scientists, the device would produce immense electromagnetic fields, gravitational anomalies, and space-time distortions. To the generals, it sounded like madness. To Hitler, it sounded like destiny. He approved the project immediately, and Die Glocke was born. The facility, Der WWII. The project required absolute secrecy. It was moved to the mountains of Lower Silesia, to an underground complex so vast that its tunnels ran for miles beneath the earth. Der WWII, the giant. A place where no Allied bombers could reach, no spies could infiltrate, and no workers survived long enough to speak. Tens of thousands of forced laborers entered. Few ever came out. Concrete walls 2 meters thick, radiation shielding, gigantic power generators, test chambers with walls scorched black. The facility was designed not for engineering, but for containment. Whatever Die Glocke was meant to do, even the Nazis feared it. The first tests, late 1941. Himmler, cloaked in his black SS uniform, walks into the observation room. Scientists warn him, the field may become unstable, the energy unpredictable, the effects unknown. Himmler merely nods. The machine activates. The bell begins to rotate, slowly at first, then faster. Its surface glows purple. Air warps around it. bending like heat over asphalt. Metal objects vibrate violently. Glass shatters. Animals in nearby cages die instantly. But the bell keeps spinning. And then, for a fraction of a second, the entire chamber becomes silent, weightless, timeless. The scientists do not know what they saw. Himmler does. He whispers, "Weiter." Continue. The obsession is set from that moment forward. Die Glocke is no longer a scientific project. It becomes a race against the Allies, a race against time, a race against the natural order of the universe, a race to build a device that might surpass Einstein, reverse gravity, rewrite reality, and possibly unleash something no human could control. Because what the SS had awakened inside those mountains would not remain contained for long. The bell starts to wake up. By early 1942, the Die Glocke project was no longer theory. It had become a daily routine of dangerous tests carried out inside the underground chambers of Der Riese. Every morning, guards sealed the tunnels. Warning signs were placed along the concrete walls. Red lights flashed above the doors, and a single order echoed through the complex. No one enters once the test begins. Even the SS obeyed that rule. The first human costs. At first, the project used animals, dogs, rabbits, goats, all placed inside metal cages surrounding the device during activation. The results were immediate and brutal. Some animals died within seconds. Some collapsed with their bodies twisted unnaturally. Others survived the test, but died hours later, bleeding from their eyes and noses. The scientists tried moving the cages farther away. It did not help. Whatever field Die Glocke created, it was not safe, not controllable, not understood. But the SS did not stop the program. They only asked one question: how do we increase the power? The bell's second form. Throughout 1942, the design evolved. The interior cylinders were rebuilt. New alloys were tested. The mysterious violet substance, Zerum 525, was refined to make it even more reactive. Witnesses described the bell at this stage as glowing like molten metal, humming with a deep vibration that could be felt through the floor, bending air and light around it, and creating shadows that did not match the objects casting them. Technicians began reporting strange symptoms: headaches, severe nausea, metallic taste in the mouth, skin peeling from their hands. Some collapsed after just minutes in the test chamber. Doctors were told these were normal reactions to experimental physics. The truth was darker. The silent disappearances. The project suffered its first human deaths in late 1942. 5 scientists exposed themselves accidentally to the bell's energy. They were removed from the facility. No one ever saw them again. The official report said they were transferred. The workers believed something else. The bell killed them, and the SS erased the evidence. From that point forward, anyone who showed severe symptoms simply vanished from the program. It became common for researchers to avoid leaning too close to the machine, to stay behind protective barriers, to avoid being noticed if they grew ill. Die Glocke was becoming more than a project. It was becoming a threat to everyone involved, even the ones building it. The strange effects on the environment. Outside the test chamber, the world began to change. Plants growing near the underground vents mutated. Their stems twisted in spirals. Their leaves formed odd patterns never seen before. Grass turned gray. Insects died in clusters. Birds avoided the mountains entirely. The air above Der Riese shimmered faintly at night, as if invisible waves were rising from the tunnels. Local villagers whispered that the mountains were cursed. Some said they heard a deep, distant hum at dawn, like a heartbeat coming from inside the earth. Most terrifying of all, a few guards reported seeing their own shadows move a moment before they did, or lag a moment behind. The SS ordered them to stop talking. The test known as The Black Mirror. In 1943, the program reached a turning point. A new experiment was designed. It required increasing the bell's rotation speed to levels the engineers considered unsafe. But the SS insisted. During the test, the chamber filled with a violet glow so bright that it lit the hallways outside. Metal tools began to rise from the floor, as if gravity itself had weakened. One scientist shouted that the device was interfering with space-time. Another screamed for the power to be cut. When the bell finally stopped, the walls of the chamber were scorched and slightly curved inward, as though reality itself had bent under pressure. In the official report, this test was called the Black Mirror Event. 2 scientists died within 48 hours. 3 others disappeared after being evacuated. The SS confiscated all notes and locked the chamber for a week. But one thing was clear. Die Glocke was no longer behaving like a machine. It was behaving like something alive. The project takes a darker turn. After the Black Mirror test, the nature of the program changed completely. Security doubled. Movement was restricted. Workers were forbidden from speaking to anyone outside their unit. And most chilling, the SS authorized human proximity trials. Not human testing? No one admitted that. But guards were positioned closer. Technicians were required to remain inside the room longer. Medical monitoring increased, but only for those essential to the project. As mortality rose, so did the pressure from Berlin. Hitler demanded progress. Himmler demanded results. Scientists demanded more time. Die Glocke demanded more lives. The program had reached a point where retreat was impossible. Only one path remained. Push harder. Go further. Break through the barrier the machine had created. Or be consumed by it. When even the SS began to whisper. By 1943, Die Glocke was no longer just a project. It had become a shadow that stretched across the entire Der Riese complex. A shadow that frightened even the men who were trained never to show fear. The SS. The whispers begin. The officers stationed near the test chambers were among the first to speak quietly about what they had seen. Not publicly, not in reports, but in murmurs exchanged during guard shifts and in dimly lit corridors. They spoke of sudden headaches that came without warning, brief moments of dizziness when the machine activated, strange flashes of light inside the tunnels, and shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally along the concrete walls. At first, these were dismissed as fatigue or imagination, but the whispers grew. A pattern emerged. Every man assigned to the project felt the same thing. Something was wrong with the bell. Something deeper than science. Something they could not explain. The incident in Tunnel 6. The turning point came during a late-night test in the winter of 1943. A squad of SS guards was stationed near Tunnel 6, the passage that led to the primary test chamber. Their role was routine: prevent access, enforce silence, and escort scientists between rooms. But that night, the guards heard a sound they had never heard before. A deep, low vibration, almost like a heartbeat. At first it was faint. Then it grew louder and louder, until the metal railings along the tunnel began to shake. Seconds later, the lights flickered. The air became thick and strange, as if the entire tunnel had changed density. One of the guards panicked and opened the emergency door. Inside, he saw something impossible. A faint sphere of light hovering near the chamber entrance. It pulsed slowly, like something breathing, and for a moment, just a moment, it looked as if the walls around it were bending inward. The SS guard collapsed in terror. He survived, but he could not describe what he saw. He could only repeat one sentence. The machine wasn't alone. The SS buried the incident immediately, but the fear had already taken root. The scientists stopped asking questions. By mid-1943, the scientific team had changed. Many of the original researchers were gone. Some transferred, some hospitalized, Some simply erased from the roster. Their replacements were quieter, more cautious, less willing to debate the purpose of the project. They no longer asked, "Is this possible?" or "Is this safe?" They only asked, "What does Berlin want next?" Even the brightest minds in the Reich were beginning to understand that Die Glocke was no longer a scientific pursuit. It had become an obsession driven not by knowledge, but by desperation. The Black Notebooks. Around this time, a new set of documents appeared, small, black-covered notebooks kept by a select group of SS scientific officers. These notebooks were not stored in the archives, not signed, not stamped. They were never meant to exist. Inside them were written descriptions of distorted time perception near the device, researchers aging rapidly or losing hair within weeks, hallucinations of movement in empty rooms, and the sense, reported by multiple witnesses, that something was approaching whenever the bell was active. Not something physical, not something human, something like a presence, a pressure, a watching. No one knew what it meant, but every man who wrote in those notebooks shared the same conclusion. The bell was interacting with something beyond the physical world. The strange predictions. One physicist, who had studied relativity before the war, wrote a chilling line in his notebook. "We are not generating energy. We are tearing the fabric that contains it." Another scientist claimed that the machine was creating localized distortions in the temporal field. Most shocking of all was the entry written shortly before he disappeared. "If Die Glocke continues to increase in power, we may bring something through, something that does not belong in this time." Hours after writing those words, he was gone. The SS listed him as a suicide. The workers did not believe it. The order from Berlin. In early 1944, the atmosphere inside Der WWII shifted again. Hitler's armies were collapsing. The Allies were advancing on every front. The Reich was running out of time. Then an order arrived. Increase the power. Increase the rotation. No matter the cost. The engineers protested. The scientists begged for more precautions. Even the SS hesitated, but Himmler's message was absolute. Germany's future depends on this device. And so, preparations began for the most dangerous test yet. A test designed to push Die Glocke beyond anything it had ever done before. A test that many believed the machine and the mountain would not survive. A test that would become the final chapter of the project. Fear takes over. In the days before the final experiment, something changed in the complex. Guards refused to work alone. Scientists avoided eye contact. Even high-ranking SS officers walked quickly through the tunnels, as if they felt something following close behind. Men reported vivid nightmares, sudden waves of dread, cold spots in empty rooms, and the sensation of being watched. The bell was not just a device anymore. It was an influence, something that affected minds as easily as it distorted matter. And for the first time, even the most loyal members of the SS whispered the same question. What have we built? Soon they would have their answer, and it would terrify them. The night everything changed. The final test of Die Glocke was set for December 12, 1944. The war was collapsing. The Red Army was approaching Silesia. American bombers filled the skies. The Reich had only months, maybe weeks, left. Inside the tunnels of Der WWII, however, the mood was not defeat. It was fear. A deep, heavy fear that clung to every man in the complex. Something was coming. Everyone felt it, and Die Glocke was at the center of it. The preparation. Hours before the test, the entire facility was locked down. All exits sealed. Power rerouted to the main chamber. Extra fuel brought in from reserves. Every scientist and technician ordered to their positions. No one could leave until the test was complete. The SS commander on site, Oberfuhrer Emil Hartmann, addressed the staff. Tonight, the Führer demands results. Failure is not an option. He did not mention what would happen if the test succeeded. He did not mention what would happen if it failed. He simply stepped aside and allowed the engineers to begin. The bell is activated. At 02:17 a.m., the generators roared to life. The chamber shook. Sparks rained from the cables overhead. Inside the reinforced silo stood the bell, silent, cold, and strapped to the floor with massive chains. The first rotation began, slow, heavy, mechanical. But within seconds, the hum changed. It rose in pitch. The air vibrated. The floor trembled. The bell was waking up. Engineers monitored gauges that pushed into the red. Pressure climbed. Magnetic fields surged. The mysterious violet liquid inside the cylinders began glowing through the metal casing. The bell spun faster and faster and faster. Then the phenomenon began. The distortion. The witnesses gave different descriptions, but all agreed on one thing. Reality shifted. Some saw the air bend like rippling water. Others said the room stretched as if space itself was being pulled inward. One scientist screamed that the bell was collapsing the field. Glass shattered. Tools flew through the air. A steel wrench hit the wall so hard it embedded itself like a bullet. The lights flickered. The power surged. And then, a flash. A violet pulse burst from the device, filling the chamber with blinding light. Men shielded their faces. Some dropped to the floor. One guard collapsed instantly, blood running from his nose and ears. But the bell did not stop. It spun even faster. The time anomaly. The next moments became the most controversial testimony in all the Die Glocke archives. Several scientists later described a sensation of time breaking. Some said the room slowed down, as if every movement took seconds longer than it should. Others said the opposite, that everything sped up around them. One researcher wrote in his hidden notebook, "I saw myself cross the room, standing where I had been moments before." Another wrote, "The shadows separated from our bodies." An SS guard who survived described seeing the chains around the bell tighten themselves, then loosen, then tighten again, as if replaying a moment forward and backward. But the most chilling account came from a technician who claimed a figure stood next to the bell. But it was not any man in the room. It was transparent and moving in a different time than us. He disappeared before the war ended. The collapse. At 02:26 a.m., the power grid failed. The lights went out. The facility plunged into darkness. Only the bell glowed, a pulsing violet sphere floating in the black. The noise became unbearable, a deep, low-frequency rumble that shook the bones inside every man. Then, a shockwave. A blast of force radiated outward from the chamber, throwing men off their feet. Concrete cracked. Pipes burst. The observation window shattered. And then, silence. Slowly, emergency lights flickered back on. The bell was still, but its surface was changed, scorched, warped, almost melted, as if something enormous had pressed against it from the inside. 5 scientists were dead. 7 were missing. And the SS made one decision. The bell must be moved immediately. The panic word spread through the complex. The machine had become unstable. The Red Army was approaching. The device could not fall into Allied hands. The test had not failed, but it had revealed something dangerous. One surviving officer wrote in a confiscated letter, "We did not unlock a weapon. We unlocked a door." Another note, unsigned, simply said, "The bell will destroy whoever keeps it." By sunrise, trains and trucks were being prepared, but there was a problem. The bell was heavier than before, far heavier, as if something inside it had changed its mass. Engineers insisted it could still be moved. The SS demanded it, but no one understood. The device was no longer predictable, no longer containable, and whatever had happened inside the chamber was not over. The final order. On December 15, 1944, Berlin sent a last encrypted message. Evacuate the device. Destroy the facility. No witnesses. And thus began the final chapter of Die Glocke, a chapter that would lead to its disappearance forever. Because on the night of the evacuation, the bell vanished, and no one, not the SS, not the Wehrmacht, not the Allies, has ever agreed on what truly happened next.